Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our September Audit Committee meeting. First of all, is apologies for absence and substitutions. Well, the most important absence is Alison Ball, who is off unwell, so I'm hoping she recovers quickly and completely. The only other absence I've got is apologies from Councillor Elwood. Right. Item number 2. To approve as the correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of June 2022.
Move it.
Can I have a seconder? Thank you. All those in favour, please show. Good. Okay. Unanimous. Declarations of interest.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just raise something in the minutes?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Can I just raise something in the minutes?
A bit closer to the microphone.
Can I just raise something in the minutes,
Yes,
please?
you may.
Thank you. Point 25 on page 7 of the minutes says that a report relating to a review of the taxi licensing fees will be brought back to this committee at a later date. Could I ask when that will happen? Thank you.
Yes, sir. Through you, Chair. I can confirm that the review by SITFA is still ongoing. The intention is to take that to the Environment and Licensing Committee, and then we'll update the Audit Committee thereafter. So it's the work with SITFA, that is kind of ongoing. They've been assisting the Council, exchange of information with them. So hopefully we'll get that concluded, Environment and Licensing Committee, and then we'll update this committee in due course. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of interest? Any? Yes. Councillor Greensmith.
Sorry, just going back to the query that Councillor Fox...
Can you speak closer?
Sorry, going back to the...
closer?
Can you hear me now? Sorry, going back to the query that Councillor Fox has just made, have we got any timescales on that report yet?
Not as such, but the intention is it will go to Environment and Licensing first. At the earliest opportunity, we'll clearly look to do that, indeed. I've got nothing, wouldn't specifically promise it's going to go to this a specific meeting, but the intention is to get this moved on as quickly as possible, and so get it to that committee at the earliest opportunity.
Item 4, Internal Audit Progress Report, pages 9 to 61 in your pack. The recommendation is that members receive the report and note actions taken or to be taken. Anybody got any points they'd like to raise about it? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. On page 16, on page 16 of the report, under areas of concern, could you tell me what measures are being put in place to address the member induction skills programme that does not define a minimum level of training expected, especially regarding compliance with GDPR and the Code of Conduct? Can you tell me when that will be addressed? I also have another point on that area of concern, and I would like to know when a training skills matrix and central record for standard and mandatory training for senior managers will also be put in place. Thank you.
Just through you, Chair, propose what we do. We've allowed Gurpreet to
Yes.
present the report, and they'll be able to kind of pick up kind of questions such as that.
Report be presented,
And then
we will.
Okay, thank you, everyone. In terms of, just as that question has been asked, I'll quickly respond to that. In the report, and there's the detail in the report on page 34, after every finding, and I think the one you're referring to is finding 1, management provide a response, and in there they provide dates as to when they would implement those, and obviously we follow those up. So on that specific one that you've mentioned, I think the date is the end of December, as in this year. But Charlotte will be talking more about the report, and we can answer any of those questions as well. But I'm just going to say a couple of things, and then Charlotte's just going to do a summary on both the individual reports. So this is our progress report. It just notes down where we are with our internal audit programme currently for 22-23. So there are two reports that we're bringing to this committee's attention. One is on corporate governance, which picks up the matters that have just been asked about, and the other is recruitment and retention. I'm pleased to say both of those are moderate opinions on both the design of controls and effectiveness, which is, from our point of view, a thumbs up. Things are operating well. There's areas to improve in, but we don't have any material or significant concerns with either of those areas. And as you'll see on what is page 14 of your packs, it just shows you the rest of the year. There's a number of reviews which are at the fieldwork stage, including cybersecurity, building control and remote working. And then you'll see the remainder of the plan and the committees, for most of those where we're intending to submit them, and others which we'll be finalising with the authority. But from my perspective, we're on track to complete our work by the end of March, which is our aim. And that's just a kind of a high level on progress. If there's any questions about progress or the Internal Audit Service in general, happy to take those at the end. But I'll pass on to Charlotte, who will go through and do a summary of the two individual reports of corporate governance and recruitment and retention.
Hi, thank you. And just to pick up on that, our overall progress, the cybersecurity review has been completed. It's just awaiting sign-off with SLT now. And just to give you some reassurance in the meantime, no high findings have been found in that report, but there are a number of findings to go through in a later committee. So yeah, the two reports I'll talk through now, the corporate governance and performance management. The purpose of this review is obviously to sort of check how efficient and effective the council is in achieving its statutory duties by looking at the framework's reporting structures, work plans, key documents such as the annual governance statement, and skills and training. And there's lots of good practice, which you'll see detailed in the report, but we did identify 3 medium and 1 low finding. So the first finding was, as Councillor has just raised, around skills. And on the member side, the issue that we found was, yes, there is member induction training. There is, you cannot sit on a committee without doing the relevant training for that committee. However, the kind of record keeping on the training attendance, and ongoing completion of ongoing training is not clear. It's not well structured. It's not very detailed, and so we think there's scope to definitely improve that. And then similarly on the staffing side, whilst skills gaps can be picked up during the appraisal process, there's no kind of centralised process for monitoring that, and so that's where the skills matrix comes in, and that's why we've raised that recommendation. And yeah, as Gurpreet mentioned, the recommendations for that are detailed in the report, and the hopeful completed date is the 31st of December, so we're confident that that will be improved in the short term. The second finding was around quarterly reporting to SLT on gifts and hospitality. So whilst there is an up-to-date log of gifts received by officers, which SLT can access whenever they want to, we would still want that quarterly reporting happening, and from our testing it wasn't happening at present. Because it focuses the mind, doesn't it? And yeah, make sure that it gets completed. And then the third medium finding was around there not being a process in place for the council to self-reflect really on its performance. So particularly for committees, there's no self-assessment process, looking at, is our terms of reference still fit for purpose? Are we achieving what we want to achieve with this committee? Are we asking the right questions? Is attendance sufficient, etc.? And so we've raised for best practice, we raised that as a finding because obviously it's important. And we kind of included the SIPFA self-assessment template in the appendix to that report, which will hopefully help officers to complete that and members. And the last finding on that report was a low finding around, again, it's a sort of administration finding really, not being a centralised process for checking that policies and procedures are being regularly updated and some areas perform much better than others in that regard. So the recommendation is around making that consistent. I think, as Gurpreet said, however, it's still a positive report, moderate assurance on the design and operational effectiveness of controls, no major issues identified. And then, so moving on to recruitment and retention, the scope of this review was to assess the policies and procedures in place. We tested a number of new starters to check that relevant checks had been undertaken, etc. And we looked at what reporting is in place around recruitment and retention. And again, there's some good practice to note, which is in the report. But we've raised 2 medium and 1 low finding. First medium finding was around, whilst all the new starters that we tested did have their checks undertaken in time, for transfer posts where people are moving from one role to another within the council, a CF1 form is supposed to be completed in time for them to start, and that wasn't done in the 2 instances that we tested. It was only 4 days later, but still, and it didn't have any consequences for those particular roles, but if the hypothetical risk is if that role had involved enhanced DBS or specific medical checks, then that might not have been done before that person started that role. And similarly, pension forms weren't on file in some of the sample, and statement of conditions wasn't on file for some of the. So again, it's an administrative issue, it feels like. And then the second finding was around an establishment list. So that lists all the current vacancies at the council, which we looked at the point of the audit and the 12 months previously, and there were 8 of 10 posts had been on that list for 12 months. But then when further discussions were had, 5 of those posts were not actually relevant live posts. They'd been removed due to budget changes, etc. But that hadn't necessarily been communicated to HR, so they were still maintaining that list, which obviously it just means that they're not sure where to focus their attention on, I guess, and there are some issues there with that. And then the third low finding was around a lack of uptake on exit interviews. Obviously, you can't force people to do exit interviews, but I think we made the recommendation around, could we just have some extra controls in place, some automatic email prompts to get leavers to do these interviews before they leave. We've raised the issue about best practice of having a retention strategy. We accept that there is limited capability, resource and capability for some of these things, but we're just raising it as best practice in the report. We will pick up on some of those retention issues in our workforce strategy review later in the year as well. But overall, again, it's a positive report with moderate assurance, both design and effectiveness of controls. And that's it from me.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Hello there. Just one, I saw glaring miss in the report regarding training. There's nothing that I've seen in there, nothing that I've received as a councillor that's coming from a by-election. I've received no training. No induction, no IT training. The only training I've had, which I asked for, was for planning so that I could substitute. And in fact, I come from a planning background, so it was the least needed. But I don't see anything in the report at all about those that come in mid-term. And I've been here since May and had not a single piece of training yet.
Through you, Chair, clearly we'll have to pick that up, and I'll feed that back and see what we can do about addressing that for you. Thank you.
I was just going to add to that. I think in finding 1 where we talk about this, we do talk about there's not that centralised list of who's done training, the frequency and when, and obviously if that was centralised and completed, it would identify individuals like yourself who've come in part way through or not in the normal election cycle, if you like, and undertaking that control would hopefully identify that and then pick that up. So I would hope that would pick it up, but it's a valid point and we'll note that as well.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hi, I'm just wondering if you're finding, I don't really know how many other councils and things you deal with, whether these are similar issues around other councils as well, because it does strike me that there's, like you say, a lot of kind of admin issues, tightening up of processes, things, and we all know how how stretched we are resource-wise. So I'm wondering if that's what's happening, you know, with this council and other councils as well. And it sounds like we're doing a pretty good job with what we've got. Yeah.
Yeah, from my experience, I think sometimes, obviously, when we verbalise our reports, we focus on the exception, so it can sound all doom and gloom. But the reality is we've given a moderate opinion on both of these, which is for us a thumbs up, and things are operating reasonably well. There are always things to improve, as we've identified. But in answer to your question, yes, we do see the same challenges, particularly around recruitment and retention. We see particular challenges, whether it's around administrative tasks, which is probably the easier headache, versus where you have other, specialist roles like planning and building control, which are always hard to recruit, which you see across all parts of local government. And so there are challenges that we see everywhere else that I think this authority also faces. I would say on average, moderate is probably slightly better than what we tend to see on these two reports. And so I wouldn't see you out of line on these two areas compared to what we've seen elsewhere. It's very similar to what we identify elsewhere in the sector.
Just really got one question to raise to the internal auditors. At the last audit committee meeting we had in June, I think it was, there was some discussion around timely responses from the SLT team. Has that improved from your point of view? Are you getting the timely responses required? There's nothing, I haven't noted anything in this report, but certainly at the last committee meeting there was sort of vague, very vague talk about it. I just wondered if you could give us an update.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, and we've had a good conversation with Paul today, and we do regularly in our pre-audit committee meetings as well with Alison, we're relatively content with kind of how things are operating. They've improved. We have a better kind of engagement of how reports go through to SLT. I think between the previous committee and this one, there was the summer holidays, which obviously also always causes a bit of a challenge with all clients that we work with. But I feel relatively confident between now and the December audit committee meeting, the discussions and the arrangements we have in place are sound, and we're getting that engagement. There will always be challenges for the authority in terms of implementation, but in terms of getting responses and knowing where we are at this stage, there's nothing that I would want to bring to this committee's attention.
Are you happy with that?
Oh, sorry, yes. Long as the internal auditors are happy, then yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to refer to page 24 in the report, which is your page 13. I note that survey responses have not been received for recruitment and... Sorry, I beg your pardon. I note that survey responses have not been received for 22-23 recruitment and retention and cybersecurity.
So recruitment and retention, we send out the survey link when we send the finalised report, and to be fair, that only actually went out just at the same time as the audit committee papers, so we'll chase up on that, but it's not too... We just couldn't put it in because they hadn't sent it, but it's not really a bad reflection on them. I think they will do it soon. And then cybersecurity isn't quite finalised yet, so we wouldn't expect to see that yet. So it's more timing than the officers.
That's fine, thank you. I'd also like to refer to responses under recommendations, constructive and practical, on risk maturity. No, sorry. On health and safety, it says disagree. Is there any reason why that wasn't agreed with?
I'd have to check back on that one. I think when I look at the survey responses, and happy to look at that one specifically, obviously what we try to do is just give an overall picture as to how survey responses are coming out, which we think is broadly positive in that the scores are on average 4 out of 5. There'll always be somewhere we don't quite get it right and we need to try and improve. I know, for example, just to pick one out on there with corporate governance, there was one disagree on there. I think Charlotte set up a discussion with Fran to talk through, just to try and understand further about what we could do. I can't recollect specifically on the health and safety one unless Charlotte can, but it is one that we always try and follow up and get any further feedback on. But I think Charlotte might have a view.
I can't remember the exact issue there, but I do know the individual at the time was quite stressed with the amount of, because he was dealing with more than one audit, and I think it was just maybe a bad day, to be honest.
That's absolutely fine. Thank you very much. Chair, I wonder if I could move the recommendation.
You can if nobody else has any more questions.
We've had a good go at this. I'd just like to amend it slightly, if that's acceptable. It says members receive the report, no actions taken or to be taken. I'd like to amend it to include and note timescales as clearly set out in the report.
Happy with that? Yes, that's happy. Okay, so including the amendment proposed by Councillor Lawrence, all those in favour, please? Any against? Okay, thank you. Right. Item number 5. Audit Committee Risk Scorecard, Quarter 1, June 2022. Report of the Head of Finance and ICT, 63 to 81. Paul's going to handle it in the absence of Alison.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Members will recall from previous meetings the role that the Corporate Risk Scorecard plays as part of the Council's corporate governance arrangements. We have 13 defined corporate risks, each of which we have assessed a target score and a current score as well, based upon their both likelihood and impact. What we've done is, as officers, we've been to various risk owners. Each risk has a defined risk owner. We've been through each of these risks, scrutinised them in the last quarter, paying particular attention to any changes in both the internal and external environment, also actions completed, or maybe some new actions been added in certain cases. This is, as the Chair just outlined, this is a report for Quarter 1, which is from 1st of April to 30th of June. And just a couple of things I'd just like to highlight for the members' attention this evening. There are 2 risks, Risk 1 and Risk 4, where we've proposed an increase in the risk score. Risk 1 is in respect of the budget overheating. Clearly, the big issue that has been the main focus of attention in recent months has been the huge whole cost of living issue, and what that means both for us as an organisation and for people in our local communities as well, which may impact upon demand for council services, for example. So again, as an organisation, cost of living, that affects us in terms of cost of the services that we have to buy in. It could lead to pressures in terms of pay awards for our staff. And again, turn that around in terms of the community, it could mean a greater demand for council services, which could again, that could also lead to pressures upon the council's budget. We think, given that this is such a significant issue, inflation has been escalating in recent months, peaked at over 10%. So it just dropped down last week's announcement to below 10%, but these sorts of levels have been unheard of for many, many years. So we think in that regard, it's only right to increase the risk score for that particular risk to a D3, which is high likelihood, serious impact, and now is a scoring rating of red. It was previously amber, but we now think it's a red. The other risk was Risk 4, which is in respect of workforce capacity. Members will recall at the previous meeting, the annual governance statement was approved, and that included some actions for 22-23 in terms of risk and control issues relating to workforce capacity in particular. That's something that we'll be looking to kind of address those issues going forwards. There are various actions for certain officers in the council. Again, we'll be monitoring that closely. And we think that that risk, again, it will still be within amber, but we think we should increase the score from C2 to C3, which is significant likelihood, serious impact. Most of the other risk scores we've left unchanged, and we've added some kind of narrative to kind of provide some context for members. I won't go through them all in turn, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that members may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Has any member got any questions at this point in time? Okay. Then on page 63, the recommendation is that we note the progress of actions identified within the corporate risk register.
Move it.
Seconder? Seconded, thank you. All those in favour, please show. Unanimous. Okay. Thank you. Right. Any other items which the Chair considers urgent? I only found out a short while ago that our head of finance was unwell, and I was going to pass the question over to Paul, but I would suggest that he, unless he's got a very quick answer, to think about it and let you know the answer within 4 working days. Are you happy with that?
Yes, Chair, I'm happy with that.
Okay, thank you. I should have switched on, shouldn't I? Thank you all for attending.